everybody, my name's Julie and I blog over at Julie is Coco and Coco. I'm so excited to be here at Quirky Mama today. I am a mostly craft and DIY blogger, and my main passion is yarn and yarn crafts. So I am going to show you, if you've never picked up a yarn, a ball of yarn, a skein of yarn, a crochet hook, knitting needles. That's what we're going to talk about today. So I said I'm Julie and I blog at Julie is Coco and Coco. I started knitting and crocheting about 10 years ago, a little longer. As you're joining in today, I'd love to hear where you're from. I'm near Dallas, Texas, and I'm so excited that it's finally starting to get cooler, and so while I do knit and crochet all year long, it's much more enjoyable to do it when it's cold outside. Hi Michelle, thanks for joining today. So before we start in with the actual crochet stitching, we're going to talk about yarn for a minute. So we have a ball of yarn. It's called a skein of yarn. So obviously you can grab this at any craft store. That we're going to use yarn today. And then we're also going to use a crochet hook. Hi Tammy. We're talking about crocheting. We're starting with the very basic crochet chain stitch. It's how all your crochet projects are going to start. And before we even do that, we're going to talk about yarn and yarn supplies. So this is a skein of yarn that you can grab just from any craft yarn store. Hi Patty. Hi Leanne. And on it, it will actually tell you some information that you'll need to know. So it tells you like the thickness of the yarn, weight, it's what it's called, how thick the yarn is. And then it also is going to tell you what size knitting needle or crochet hook it recommends. Now, I don't always use what it recommends, but it's a very good place to start. Hi Nancy. 65 years you've been crocheting. Wow. I've only been doing it for about 10 years, but I'm hoping to get to 65. This is a skein of yarn that a local yarn shop here in the Dallas area. I have a friend who dyes and spins yarn, and so this is another way that yarn might look depending on where you buy it. And it's about the same thickness. This is called worsted weight, and it's probably my favorite weight of yarn to use for projects. It's just very versatile. So start with like a worsted weight yarn. I said you can get it at a dedicated yarn store, or you can just go to the craft store and grab a skein of yarn. Especially when you're starting, there's really no reason to spend a lot of money on yarn when you're just starting out and you're practicing. So, like I said, we're going to do the very basic today. So the first thing that you're going to do when you get your crochet hook is there's a couple different ways to hold it. Now, because I want you to be able to see my hands and not really my face while we're doing this, I'm going to flip the camera around so you can look at my hands. So there might be a little awkward moment as we do this. So hi, let's get to know each other really well for a second. So here we go, down to a white background. So hopefully this will be easier to see everything that we're doing. Okay. So I've got my yarn, and I actually just pulled off kind of a small piece that we're going to work with. So the yarn that's connected to the ball, this part, is called the working yarn. So the first thing before we even do the chain stitch is you have to get the yarn onto your needle, right? So you're going to do something called a slip stitch. Love seeing all these people from Texas. Hi. Okay, so to do the slip stitch, we want to curve the yarn and then you're going to flip it. So you've made almost like a ribbon, okay? This side is on top. You want to grab this piece, that was the piece that's underneath, and pull it through. And then you have a slip stitch. So we're going to talk about, you asked what kind of crochet is better for beginners. We're going to start with just the basic stitches. So today we're going to do a chain stitch, and then we'll move on to single crochet, double crochet, and hopefully get into some really fancy stitches. But today we're just talking about getting our yarn onto the needle and then doing a chain stitch. So again, here's the slip knot. Here's my yarn. I want to flip it over, and then I'm pulling this piece through. Okay, and it's called a slip stitch because the knotted part, right here, the knot, slips. So you can determine how tightly it fits around your needle. Obviously you want it close, but you don't want it too tight because you do have to be able to get your hook to maneuver through that knot. Okay, so let's do that one more time, the needles. So your yarn, I would recommend starting with a worsted weight yarn, a medium weight yarn. I also really recommend starting with a lighter color yarn. It's much easier to see the stitches as you're working. So grab a lighter color yarn to start with, and then it's going to tell you, so this one says it recommends a J hook, which is also called a size 10, or a 6mm. Yes, the same hook has like 3 different names. So this is actually an I hook, so it's one size smaller than the label recommends, but for me it's comfortable, so that's what I've got. Okay, one more time with the slip knot. So this is it up in the air. So hold it, flip it, pull it through. Okay, now you're ready to put your crochet hook in. Okay, there's a couple different ways to hold your crochet hook. So the first one is called the knife hold, and it is similar to the way that you would hold a knife when you're eating. So I've got my thumb that's resting on this indented flat part. Get it closer. This indented flat part of my hook. My thumb is resting on that, and then I have my pointer finger up here. Now this method, you're using your whole hand more when you crochet, but it's the way that I crochet. Another method to hold your hook is called the pencil method. Just like it sounds, instead of holding your crochet hook like a knife, you're holding it like a pencil. And in this one, your fingers are doing the movement much more. I learned to do it this way, and so that's the way that I continue to crochet. But yes, Amy says a bigger is better to learn. Yes, definitely start with a bigger yarn and a bigger crochet hook. I would not recommend getting any of the specialty yarns to start with. Anything that's got fringe or that's differences in weight. Sometimes there's yarn, thick and thin yarns, so part of the yarn is thick and part of it's thin, and you really just want a very simple yarn to start with in a lighter color and a crochet hook that's not too small. So once you have the yarn on your crochet hook, then we can start stitching. So the very first stitch that you need to know is a chain stitch. I hold mine too tight. What do I do? Really, we're just going to practice is the best. As you're starting, make sure that this slip knot isn't too tight around your crochet hook. And then we're going to start. Okay, so I've got, as I said, this is the working yarn. It's what's connected to the ball over here. And then I've got this piece that's over here. So we are crocheting the working yarn. So I've got my hook, and I want the yarn to kind of come from the top and over the hook. Let me get this closer so you can see it better. So I've got the yarn, it's coming over, and then obviously it's going into the hook on my crochet hook. You see that? Okay. Joni, yes, can you do one on knitting? I am. I'm going to do both crochet and knitting. We're going to kind of rotate back and forth. So today we're doing crochet, and then next week we'll talk about knitting. All right, so I've got my yarn, and I'm kind of twisting my crochet hook and pulling it through the slip knot. Now I have one chain that I've created down here, and I have another one that's on my crochet hook. So let's do that again. Holding my yarn, it's coming over the top, hooking in the hook part of my crochet hook, and I'm kind of twisting the needle and sliding it through the stitch. Explain, yes, I'm sorry, explain how I'm holding the yarn in my working yarn in my hand. So I like to hold it over. So here's my hand flat, and I've got it over my index finger, and then I've got the yarn just hanging down here. And I'm also, this piece that's coming off my hook, I'm kind of holding between these fingers to give it a little bit of tension as I'm doing this. So sometimes as I'm knitting and crocheting, I like to feel like I'm really in control of my working yarn. So sometimes I will actually wrap it around like that, just so I can really control the speed and the tension of that working yarn. Sometimes the yarn's slippery, or especially with knitting, the knitting needles might be slippery, and I really want to make sure that I'm in control of how quickly that yarn is coming through. For chaining, I do it primarily just over my index finger. So I'm holding it like that. I'm doing the knife hold with my crochet hook as opposed to the pencil hold, but do whatever. Here, I'll do one with pencil. So it's same thing. I've got my chain stitch that's on the hook. I've got my working yarn over here. I want the needle to come up. I want the yarn to be coming across the top of my hook into the hook. I'm kind of twisting my crochet hook as I pull it through the chain. All right, so let's do another one with this pencil. Here's my hold, getting my yarn in the hook, sliding it through the stitch. Okay. Another thing that I kind of like about the knife hold is that I have my index finger free and I can kind of move this around if I need to. So I'm still pulling on the chain stitch that I have completed. I've got the yarn over my index finger. I've got the knife hold on my crochet hook. I'm coming up. I'm wrapping the yarn around the top, twisting my crochet hook, and pulling it through. And we are starting to form our chain stitch. And really, with crochet and with knitting, practice. So that's kind of why I came up with the craft that we're going to do in a minute, these chain stitch coasters. It's a craft that all you have to do is know this one chain stitch. And yes, okay, so all the different holds that I was showing you, I am right-handed, so I am holding the crochet hook in my dominant hand. Both of the holds, the knife hold and the pencil hold, you could do left-handed. So whatever your dominant hand is, that's where you're going to want to hold the crochet hook in, and your non-dominant hand is where you're going to have the working yarn. So again, I'm going over and pulling it through. And we've got our chain stitches going. So if you're just joining in, today we're doing Crochet 101, and we're talking about chain stitches. This is how you're going to start every, when I say every, it's like grammar with, you know, a rule that has some exceptions. Pretty much every crochet project you're going to do is going to start with a chain stitch. Once you get the chain stitch, it's kind of the foundation. So once you start it, then you go back and build on it for scarves, gloves, sweaters, whatever it is that you're making. I said there are some exceptions that we'll get to that in a minute, but, well, not in a minute, but eventually. But for now, let's just say that every crochet project is going to need you to start with a chain stitch. And really, you're just going to want to practice this over and over, wrapping it around, pulling it through, wrapping it around, pulling it through. I'm continuing to have my fingers here. That gives tension to my work. I've got the tension here with my working yarn, and together I can control how quickly the yarn comes, and I can do this. Okay, so we're working on our chain stitch, and as you're going, obviously you'll get faster and faster. And that's your chain stitch until you can get it to like a really long one. So depending on what you're making, obviously you might need a really long starting if you're doing a blanket or something. But so this is just a chain stitch. You can see. And it's in the same gray yarn that I was working with just a minute ago. And I love with crochet because even this, so this is one stitch, right? One stitch. We talked about the slip knot so that we could get our yarn onto our crochet hook. But other than that, it's this one movement that we were talking about. Just the chain stitch. And you'll come up with this. And I'm going to show you some really cool, so I didn't want to just show you a stitch today and say, okay, that's it, you're done. Because even this one stitch, you can do some projects with. So I did kind of a holiday one. This is a little bit, this is obviously a variegated yarn, meaning instead of just one solid color, it was a multicolored strand. So with this chain stitch, you can wrap it around your wrist. You'll have these ends. You can tie them together. You can make a cute little bracelet. I've got the camera flipped, but I've seen where they can loop them. Loop your chain stitch. They have chain stitch necklaces, and you can buy like those beads with the really like wooden beads that have the really big holes. And you can even slide them onto your chain stitch and make a really cute necklace just looped together. So the begin and end of your chain stitch, you know, we have this piece down here where we made our slip knot. When you finish it off, you'll end up with another piece. So those are really easy to just tie together, and you can make a cute little necklace. You can also use your chain stitch to wrap some gifts. Okay, Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books, and I found this gorgeous, this is totally unrelated to crochet, but I found this gorgeous like 1940s edition at the thrift store that has, oh I missed it, that's illustrated. Okay, it's gorgeous. It is possibly a Christmas gift for my sister, who's also in love with crochet. Yeah, I'm going to show you how to end it in just a second. So, you can I mean, even use this as like ribbon and wrap up a gift. And it adds a cute little handmade, homemade touch to any present that you have that little detail on there. Okay, so once you're done, once you've reached the length that you need with your chain stitch, just grab your scissors and cut the working end of the yarn so it's attached to the ball over here. You still have one stitch left on your hook, so we're going to make that big. Take our hook out and you're going to pull the working yarn through that and knot it off. Just like that, and you'll have your chain stitch. So this obviously is one that is a lot longer. So other than wrapping the chain stitch that I just showed you, like make a cute bracelet, necklace, gift wrap, you can also make some chain stitch coasters. So that's all this coaster is a chain stitch that I've spiraled around. So we're going to do that right now. I'm going to plug in my hot glue gun, get it warmed up. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. So you can use hot glue to make your coaster, which is what this one is. Or you can use a tapestry needle and whatever color yarn that you used for your coaster. And that's what this one is. It's stitched together. So while my hot glue gun warms up, we'll start with stitching this together. So you can start at either end, and I'm going to cut my yarn really close for starting in the center. And then I'm just going to coil it. Just like that. And on the back side, okay, so on your chain stitch, kind of has like these, looks like V's a little bit on the front, and then the back has this bump that goes down the back. So front looks like V's, and the back is a little bit bumpy. Okay, so I've got one end of my chain and I'm coiling it. And then I'm just going to use my tapestry needle to kind of go through those bumps to hold it together. And then I'm just going to keep stitching as I wrap. And there's not really, I'm not a sewer, a seamstress. I am a crocheter, a knitter. So this is, I'm sure there's a better way probably to do this, but I'm just going through the backside and attaching the newly coiled layer to what already exists. So starting right here, I'm just attaching this kind of first round to the center. And I did cut this yarn kind of long, but I didn't want to have to keep cutting new pieces. So I'm really just going through the back side, going through those bumps on the back of my crochet on my chain stitch and attaching what's already coiled to what I'm coiling. And then kind of depending on how, you don't have to do it every stitch, but every couple as you're wrapping. So as I'm wrapping, I'm attaching these center coiled pieces to what I'm still wrapping around. Now, if you don't have a big needle like this, and you don't want to hand stitch this all, you can also definitely use your hot glue gun. Same idea. The part that is already coiled, I'm just dropping on a little bit of hot glue, and then I'm attaching it, kind of twisting, another dot of hot glue, twisting, and you can keep going. I used, this is just some wool that I got at the craft store that I thought would make really cute ones for Thanksgiving. I'm actually gonna do, have my kids help me with some felt, and even I might turn this little brown coaster into a turkey. We could add some felt feathers on the back. So today we're doing Crochet 101. We talked about slip knots and a chain stitch, and how that one little stitch you can use to wrap some goodies and make some coasters. So I grabbed some, this is kind of a sparkly yarn. I thought it would be fun to make a set. So I said there's kind of a Thanksgiving set. It's brown for drink coasters. And then a holiday set that's red and green. Now, kind of a caveat, things that I learned as I was practicing this. So you see my coaster is a little bit bowl-shaped. If you hot glue the coils too tightly together, it's going to form a bowl. So don't do that. It needs to be not as tight so that you have a flat coaster. As for size, I happen to have some cork coasters that I had used to make this little football coaster. And so I just used it kind of as a gauge on how to make that. So today we covered the chain stitch. Next week, if you come back, same time, we're going to do a little intro to knitting, and we'll talk about all the different ways to cast on. Well, not all the different ways. There's dozens of ways to cast on, but we'll cover a few of the most popular ways to cast on for knitting, so you can start making some handmade gifts this year. And then we'll continue our crochet series with the next stitch we'll learn is a single crochet. So practice your chain stitches. Make some cute wrapping for your gifts or jewelry, or make some holiday coasters. These are really easy to make. They're great to use up if you have any kind of yarn stash. Go to the craft store, just get really cheap yarn for these. You can make all sorts of different colors. You can do for birthdays, anytime, any dinner party you're hosting. I mean, you can make these in any theme that you could want. I hope you'll come over to Julie is Coco and Coco and check out all my other crochet and knitting crafts and patterns and other yarn crafts. I do have some that don't require any knitting or crochet. We've got these cute Christmas trees and pom-poms and all sorts of things. So head over there. I also will have this video up on my blog so you can see it from the beginning if you came in late and missed part of the explanation for the slip knot or any of the chain stitches. If you have any questions, please just let me know. And I can't wait to craft again with you next week. So have a great weekend, happy Friday, and go get some yarn and start crafting. Thanks everybody, bye!